I'm John Zippert. I'm the Director of Program Operations for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives at our Rural Training and Research Center in Epps, Alabama. And I'm here today to talk about the issue of the loss of black farmland in particular, in the context, kind of overall context of land loss, and I'll refer to some of the other issues connected with it. But our focus has been on the loss of black farmland, and I'm happy that the U.S. government is conducting this periodic review of human rights, and it does, I think, in terms of rural people and in terms of African American people in the South. This particular issue is one that ought to be looked at in terms of the performance of the U.S. government and the society as a whole in regards to this problem. And 1920 was the high point of black land ownership in America. And there were over 1 million black people engaged in agriculture in the South, and they owned 15 million acres of land. So the high point of black land ownership was almost a century ago. In 1960, we were down to 100,000 black farm operators and 6 million acres. And so 1960, you would say, was the beginning of the civil rights movement. In 2007, agricultural census says that there are less than 25,000 black farm operators and less than 3 million acres of land. So we're really talking here about a problem over a century where the numbers of people and the acreage of land has been declining. And at some points in the past, I think we've lessened this a little, but black people were losing 1,000 acres of land a day. And put a value on that. $1,000 an acre, $1,500 an acre. So in terms of a resource, millions and millions of dollars of wealth have left the black community in the South as a result of this problem. How did this happen? And of course, there have been books written on this, and I have 10 minutes, but some of it was chicanery and fraud, and there's clear evidence for many years that land was just taken and stolen from people. I have anecdotal stories of people who went to the grocery store and they were getting sardines and crackers, and they were asked to sign a paper, and it turns out they signed a quitclaim deed for their land. Things like that happen. Other people who own land were terrorized and driven away from the South. There's sufficient documentation and history of that. Some of that has, that period, there's less of that going on, although there are people today who move fences arbitrarily, who harvest timber accidentally, who do various other things that are in this same category, and unless you stand up and fight it, it goes on. There are also tax sales. People, often when there are economic downturns, people don't have the money to pay their property tax. And we've heard earlier here that the property tax in Alabama is not as high as it should be, and it's actually proportionately higher on small landowners than on big timber companies. attorneys. And so often people face the problem, particularly in times of economic difficulty, in paying their taxes. And some of you know I also publish a newspaper, and the first week of April is when they publish notice in all of the papers of record in Alabama. And we had in Greene County literally a page and a half during this period of listings of people, and it's listed for 3 weeks. So and after the first listing, some people come and pay, so it's less of a listing. But we still had in the third listing this week probably a full page. And this is land that will be sold. And many of the small tracts are pieces of land owned by African Americans. Another issue is the issue of heir property and partition sales. And this is the situation where a person dies without a will and the land passes to their family without a group of people then own the land in common. Sometimes in large families where grandpa died in 1950 without a will, we now have 100 people involved in the land. Some own as little as 1/100th or 1/200th or something like that. In some cases, people are approached to sell their minimal interest to somebody outside of the family. Then that person can come under Alabama law and force a sale of the total property. And in the last 20, 30 years, I've observed that much of the land lost, the farmland lost in the Black Belt of Alabama, has been because of heir property and partition sales. There's a young lady at Auburn who did a study of 60,000 acres owned by black people in Macon County, which is where Tuskegee is, over 20,000. So 1 in 3 acres is in the status of heir property. And this is land that will be lost.